Thank you for being part of the screencasting workshop here at OTC. I'm sure at some point you've said you'd like to get around to making a little welcome video to use in your online course. So for screen movies, you can record anything that's happening on your screen. It's really good for flipped classrooms, student projects, digital storytelling, specific demonstrations where you have to go step by step, or feedback on student work. There's lots of options, but today we're going to do Screencast-O-Matic.
Right? Logic tells us there should be as many great hockey players born in the second half of the year as born in the first half. But what we can see here is that basically there's almost no one born at the end of the year. Everyone's from the beginning. So common sense would say that if you simply started a second parallel hockey league, which had a cutoff date of June or July 1st and not January 1st, you should be able to develop twice as many elite hockey players. Right? So the capitalization rate for hockey players in Canada, a country, by the way, which takes hockey more seriously than any other country on the face of the earth, the cap rate for the thing that Canadians care more deeply about than anything else is 50%. Astonishingly low, right? And the constraint in this case is not poverty. The constraint in this case is the stubborn refusal on the part of the hockey establishment to acknowledge that they are very, very poor developers of talent. So this is not a poverty constraint, this is a stupidity constraint. In other words, so this is an example of where institutions get in the way of the development of human potential. Constraint number 3 is the most important of the constraints, and this comes from James Flynn, who I mentioned at the beginning. So Flynn got really interested in why it was that Chinese American immigrants to the United States vastly outperform white Americans. Why do they do so well? They come here, they don't know the language, they don't have any money, and within one generation, their kids are achieving at an extraordinary rate. And what he discovered is in the highest occupational rung, that is professional, managerial, technical, the Chinese Americans had 55% of their population make that highest rung, and the same number for white Americans is 34%. That is a massive difference in capitalization between these two groups. So now why is that? Well, for years, sociologists struggled with trying to explain why it is Chinese Americans do so well. And there's been a very, very serious and extensive line of argument which says they're smarter. Their IQs are higher. Right? There's a British psychologist who would argue this for years, and there are many people who still believe this. But Flynn, who is the world's leading expert on IQ, very, very carefully went through the data and realized, actually, it's not true at all. So what is it? Right? Well, what he found was two things. One is that Chinese American immigrants to America with average IQs perform as well, go as far in the world as white Americans with very high IQs. And the difference seems to be that a Chinese American with an IQ of 100 performs as well as a white American with an IQ of 120. The second thing, which is linked to the first, is that of the available pool of talent in the Chinese American community, their cap rates are way higher. The cap rates for Chinese Americans in the professions, that is to say the percentage of people who are capable of, smart enough to be a professional, who end up being a professional, is 78%. In the white American community, that number is 60%. Now, why do they do so much better then how are they able to so brilliantly capitalize on the available talent in their community? And the answer, Flynn says, is because they work harder. Why do they work harder? And the explanations it's quite fascinating when you dig into it. And I'll give you one little taste of that, and that is if you take a sense of just how